Imagine a corporation so powerful that it ruled over an entire subcontinent. A company that started out trading in textiles and tea, but ended up commanding armies, levying taxes, and deciding the fate of millions. While this may sound like the plot of a dystopian novel, it's actually the true story of the British East India Company and its astonishing rise to power in India. How did a handful of merchants from a small, damp island on the edge of Europe come to dominate a vast, ancient civilization on the other side of the world? The answer involves a dizzying mix of bravery, brutality, and Machiavellian scheming that would make even the most ruthless modern CEOs blush. Prepare for a breathtaking ride through the history of the British Raj, from the early days of spice trading to the bloody battles of conquest and the eventual collapse of the company that started it all. This is the story of corporate conquest, the British Raj, and how modern India was made. It's 1600, and a group of London merchants gather around a table in a dimly lit tavern. At their helm is Sir Thomas Smythe, a wealthy member of Parliament and a man of immense influence. Also present are investors who read like a who's who of London's merchant elite. Members of the Levant Company, who had grown rich trading with the Ottoman Empire, rubbed shoulders with the powerful men of the Muscovy Company, who held a monopoly on trade with Russia. Already rich and powerful, these men dream of something grander, something that will make them rich beyond their wildest imaginings. And so, with a glint in their eyes, they hatch a plan to corner the market on the lucrative spice trade. Smythe uses his contacts to gain an audience with Queen Elizabeth I. They convince her to grant them a royal charter, a piece of paper that gives them the exclusive right to trade with all the lands east of the Cape of Good Hope. With that, the East India Company is born, a beast that will one day grow to be the most powerful corporation the world has ever seen. At first, the company sets its sights on the fabled Spice Islands of Indonesia, hoping to break the Dutch and Portuguese monopoly on the trade in nutmeg, cloves, and pepper. But the competition is fierce, and the company soon realizes that it is out of its depth. On the other hand, India, the land of gold and diamonds, silks and spices, is an untapped market with far less competition. So in 1639, the company's agents land on the shores of southern India. With a combination of charm, bribery, and outright threats, they convince the local ruler to grant them a small plot of land, a sandy spit jutting out into the Bay of Bengal. There, they build a fort, a tiny outpost that they christen Fort St. George, which will one day grow into the megacity of Chennai and prove to be the seed from which the entire British Empire will grow. Initially, the English traders were welcomed by India's Mughal rulers. Both sides realized the benefits the trade could bring. The English were given trading rights, and in return, they brought European products to India. Trade expanded, with English traders building many trading posts and factories across India. However, fast forward to the late 1600s, and the once humble East India Company has become intoxicated with its own success. It begins to demand ever greater concessions from the Mughal rulers, but the Mughals refuse to bend to the company's will. So in a move that would shock even the most ruthless of modern-day CEOs, the company takes a drastic step. It begins to assemble its own private army, recruiting local Indian soldiers known as sepoys. The company then launches attacks on Mughal ports and even wages war against the emperor himself in the Anglo-Mughal War of 1686 to 1690. Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor, deals a crushing defeat to the company, but is distracted by the relentless incursions of his rivals, the Maratha Confederacy. As a result, he lets the company off with a mere apology and a hefty fine, failing to realize that this momentary lapse in judgment will sow the seeds of his empire's downfall. In 1707, Aurangzeb dies, leaving behind a fractured and weakened realm. The company, ever opportunistic, sees its chance and makes its move, offering support to rival princes and regional powers vying for the throne, slowly tightening its grip on the Indian subcontinent. Before long, the East India Company is in control and is a private company effectively ruling over the Empire of India. For the average Indian, life under the company's rule is harsh. Poverty, famine, and violence stalk the land as the company mercilessly squeezes the peasants dry. Farmers are forced to sell their crops for a pittance, only to have to buy back overpriced British goods. When famine strikes, the company is only interested in maintaining its profits. During the Bengal famine of 1770, a drought devastates food production, but the company simply continues to raise taxes and hoard what little food there is. As a result, around 10 million people died from illness and starvation. But back in Britain, the company is making a select few obscenely wealthy. Company shares became the most sought-after commodity in the land, and its directors are hailed as heroes of the empire. The riches flowing in from India fuel the fires of the Industrial Revolution as British factories churned out goods to feed the company's insatiable appetite for trade. But eventually, in 1857, discontent among the Indian masses boils over. The subcontinent erupts in a conflagration that would shake the very foundations of British rule. The spark that lit the fire of rebellion came from an unlikely source. A rumor that the new Enfield rifles being issued to the Indian sepoys used cartridges greased with cow and pig fat, thus offending the religious sensibilities of both Hindus and Muslims. When the sepoys refuse to use the cartridges, they are shackled and imprisoned. This is the final straw. On May 10, 1857, the sepoys at Meerut mutiny, shooting their British officers and marching on Delhi. The rebellion spread like wildfire across northern and central India. Sepoys and civilians alike rose up against the British, driven by a heady mix of religious fervor, nationalist sentiment, and sheer desperation. The British are caught off guard and are initially pushed back. But they soon regroup, unleashing a campaign of terror, bayoneting sepoys, executing them with cannons and burning villages. The reprisals far outweigh the initial rebellion in their ferocity, but the rebellion is the beginning of the end for the East India Company. It exposes the fragility of the company's hold on India and shatters any illusions about the benevolence of its rule. The British Crown decides to take direct control of India, ushering in the era of the British Raj, or rule. Queen Victoria is declared the Empress of India, and the Viceroy becomes her representative on the subcontinent. This sets the pattern for life in India over the next century. Under the Raj, India underwent a period of modernization. Railways and telegraph lines are built, connecting the vast subcontinent like never before. Western education and legal systems are also introduced. But the country continues to experience widespread poverty and famine, with Indian interests stifled to protect those of Britain. And the seeds of nationalism, sown during the Great Rebellion, continue to grow, eventually blossoming into the Indian independence movement led by Mahatma Gandhi and others. The end of British rule finally comes nearly a century later in 1947 with the chaotic and violent partition of the subcontinent into India and Pakistan. The story of Britain's rule over India is a cautionary tale of the perils of unchecked power and the resilience of the human spirit. What began as a trading venture by the East India Company morphed into a corporate empire that subjugated an entire subcontinent. Raj brought both modernization and exploitation, progress and poverty, leaving a complex legacy that endures to this day. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about the most important events in our history, click on the videos here. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more.